This is Comics vs. Show for The Walking Dead, Season 5, Episode 15, Try. This is just a fun look at the differences and similarities between the show and comics and has no spoilers for the show, but does have spoilers for the comics. So I already went over that Rick ended up finding out that she's abusive on her own. He didn't have the help of Carol. He just saw the boy with the black eye and then talked to Michonne, and Michonne's like, yeah, you should investigate. Rick first talks to Jesse while she's hanging laundry, not while she's smoking next to an owl statue. Also, going further, Jesse admits that her husband Pete doesn't act like himself now, but she kind of makes it sound like this is a different person that he's become, so he wasn't abusive before. So that might be different from the show, because in the show, Jesse definitely says, yeah, Pete used to be abusive, but then he got help and he got better, and now with the post-apocalypse, he's back to being Pete. And then in the comics, she's like, oh no, he just changed. So that might be a difference, or it may have just been a weird way for her to phrase it. Pete does walk in during this conversation with Jesse, and it doesn't end like it does in the show. In the show, Pete walks in and Rick confronts him and then their fist fight starts. But in the comics, Pete walks in to Rick and Jesse talking, but they make an excuse about the kids getting together, and then Rick leaves without the fight starting. Rick does, in the comics just like the show, go and talk to the leader of Alexandria, and cool enough, they are both, in the comics and in the show, standing in front of those graves. The imagery was almost the same and amazing. And basically the same thing comes from it. The leader of Alexandria is like, hey, he's a doctor, he helps people, so we kind of turn a blind eye to this. What's different is in the comics, Rick doesn't say, I'm going to kill him. Rick actually says, we either need to exile him or kill him. But in the show, he's like, no, we just need to kill him, and then the leader of Alexandria is like, no, we're going to do exile. So that was a little different. After this discussion, he goes back to Jesse and Pete's house, and Pete opens the door, and Rick straight up punches him, and that's when the fight starts. So the fight definitely starts different in the comics than in the show. In the show, the fight started a lot earlier. In the comics, Rick knocks on the door, knocks him out, and then what is so cool is the shot in the show was almost exactly like the shot in the comic, where Rick is fighting him, and then they both go out the window pane with the wicker chairs. Like, the shot was almost perfect. I was actually, like, screaming with excitement. And then the punching out fight happens. There's a little bit more dialogue from Pete that we didn't get to see in there, and Rick's speech at the end was a bit different than what we see in the show versus the comics. I think the speech in the show was just as good as the speech in the comics, though, and we don't see Jesse getting hit by Pete and then Carl getting hit by Rick, so that doesn't happen during the fight. But during his speech, Rick does go, we need to start monitoring who comes in here, and the leader of Alexandria, just like the show and the comics, says, that's never been more clear to me than it is right now. And Rick responds, both in the show and in the comics, you mean me? Final thing is Michonne does end up getting behind Rick and hitting him in the head in the show and in the comics during his crazy speech, so that was exactly the same. So those were the differences and similarities between the comic and the show for The Walking Dead Season 5, Episode 15, Try. Come back next week when we do one for the finale. Otherwise, make sure you like and subscribe.